Hi, I'm Emily, and I wanted to talk a little bit more about what happened with my whole toxic shock syndrome story. On Monday, March 12th, it started off like a normal day. I ended up going to school, got home, had a lot of free time, so I drove to Laguna, and when I was driving back, I started getting this really weird feeling all over. Went to bed, and then I woke up from 1 a.m. till 7 a.m. I was throwing up on the hour every single hour. And at that point, I started having fevers, and I slept on the cold tile of my bathroom floor. The next day, I walked up to my mom, told her like I had been throwing up all night, I couldn't go to school, so she let me take a sick day. And then I was laying in bed all day, completely lethargic. I couldn't even sit up to drink water. I didn't move, really, at all. My mom, later in the day, suggested going to the ER just to see if it was a common cold or something along those lines, and I dismissed the idea of it, just saying if it is a common cold, we can wait till the next day to go to my regular pediatrician. At 12 a.m., I was throwing up, and so I walked to my mom's room and told her, so I went back to my room, laid down, and waited for my mom and my stepdad to walk me down the stairs because I couldn't actually carry myself down the stairs. We ended up going to the community hospital, and I was taken, and within 10 minutes I was put on IVs and Zofran, which is a anti-nausea medication. A couple hours later they came back saying, well, it's probably just a UTI. The doctor had us take a vote whether to give me antibiotics yet or not. I was sent away without antibiotic. The next day, after getting like 3 bags of IV fluids in me, I was much more hydrated, was feeling better, but instead of sleeping all day, I was still laying in my bed lethargic, and I was just staring at walls. I didn't believe it was a UTI just because the extent and the other symptoms I had didn't really add up. I ended up remembering reading Peyton Capel's story about when she had toxic shock, and I went through, reread her article, and went and read the symptoms of it, and I had almost all of them. So I suggested that to my mom, and so she looked more into it and also thought that it was pretty probable. She called my pediatrician, scheduled an appointment later that day. My pediatrician looked at me and just cringed because I looked absolutely horrible. Strep and flu test came back, both were negative, and at that point we were sent to the ER. We got to Memorial, and our pediatrician had said she was going to call in to the hospital just so they know I can skip the wait. So we check in and mentioned that to them, and they said, well, we didn't get a call, so you have to wait the 11 hours just like everyone else. And that's when we started to panic a bit, and we were waiting around for maybe 15 minutes, and then the pediatrician finally called, and I was brought back for vitals and more blood tests and to be hooked up to an IV and all that good stuff. And I had maybe 2 or 3 doctors who were working on my case, but honestly, I could not even count the amount of doctors who came in, asked me questions, and were just so confused by me because no one knew what I had. They were throwing out ideas like a UTI. They also suggested scarlet fever, and some other random things that I can't recall. And so I was barely awake at this point, but my mom kept suggesting toxic shock and asking, is it probable? And she was shut down every single time she would ask about it. They brought me into the hospital overnight and just to monitor me, and I was put on 3 antibiotics, one of them being vancomycin, and at the time we didn't know that I was allergic to vancomycin, but a couple hours after being put on it, I developed this red rash on my entire body that made my body feel like it was on fire. And I had called my nurse and he gave me Benadryl, and I had to take Benadryl every single time I took a dose of vancomycin. The entire next day I was asleep. The Benadryl knocked me out. On Thursday, this doctor came into my room and told us that it's possibly toxic shock syndrome. We kind of laughed because we had been suggesting that to every doctor along the way, and after hearing that I went back to bed and I woke up the next day with a really bad cough. And when the infectious disease council came in again to do their rounds, they noticed how bad my cough was and they sent me for chest x-rays. And it turns out that I had pneumonia along with possibly toxic shock. They still weren't sure at the time. Friday was a pretty mellow day. Nothing really happened out of the ordinary. It was pretty much all procedure stuff, like vitals every 4 hours, and I still hadn't eaten anything since Monday afternoon. I needed a nurse to go to the bathroom with me just because I needed help walking there, and they wanted to make sure I wasn't going to pass out and hit my head on the ground while I was going to the bathroom. Saturday came around and it was also 10 days away from my 18th birthday, which at the time I thought I would be spending in the hospital. Nothing really happened. I ended up eating a small amount of food, and that was the first time eating since, like I said, Monday afternoon. Around 7 p.m. the infectious disease doctor comes in and she confirms that I had the staph bacteria for toxic shock, but there's also another bacteria you can have, which is the strep bacteria, and I had both. I started looking into more toxic shock syndrome cases, and I found more about Peyton's case, but I also found out about this girl named Lauren, and she ended up having her leg amputated and more recently having the other leg amputated, both from, I think, the knee down. I just wanted to make this video because I wanted to increase awareness for toxic shock. It can happen to anyone, and we don't know necessarily what caused it for me. All in all, I just want to say it's not rare, it's real. Thank you for listening.